The text arrived less than 24 hours before my sister's wedding. First I thought it was a joke. Then I read it again. "You're no longer welcome tomorrow. Only Real family belongs at my wedding." I stared at the screen in disbelief. After everything I had done for her. After the money I had contributed. After spending months helping her plan the biggest day of her life. But the message wasn't the worst part. The worst part was discovering my parents agreed with her. So I sent one calm reply. By sunrise, the wedding venue had canceled the entire event. And suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to me. The text message arrived at 8:17 p.m. I remember the exact time because I stared at it for nearly 5 minutes, convinced I was reading it wrong. "You're no longer welcome at the wedding tomorrow. Only Real family belongs there." It was from my sister. My younger sister. The same sister whose wedding I had spent months helping organize. The same sister I had defended countless times growing up. The same sister I thought loved me. At first, I honestly believed it was some kind of terrible joke. Then my phone rang. It was my mother. The moment I answered, I knew the message was real. "Please don't make this harder than it already is," she said. Harder? I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. "What are you talking about?" I asked. My mother's side told me everything. "Your sister thinks it's best if you don't attend." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Just weeks earlier, I had helped choose the venue. I had spent evenings reviewing vendor contracts. I had contributed money when unexpected expenses appeared. I had done everything a supportive sister could do. Yet somehow 24 hours before the wedding, I was being erased from it. When I asked why, nobody gave a clear answer. Only vague excuses. Awkward silence. And empty explanations. Then my father called. Instead of defending me, he supported the decision. That's when I realized this wasn't just my sister's choice. My parents were standing beside her. So I sent one final text. "Understood. Good luck tomorrow." Then I turned off my phone. And went to bed believing the worst was already over. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the conversations in my head. My sister's message. My mother's excuses. My father's disappointment. The more I thought about it, the less sense it made. I wasn't some distant relative. I was her sister. Yet somehow, everyone had decided I didn't belong. The next morning, I turned my phone back on. Instantly, dozens of notifications appeared. Most weren't apologies. They were messages from relatives asking me not to create drama. Not to ruin my sister's special day. Not to make things difficult. The irony was unbelievable. I hadn't called anyone. I hadn't argued. I hadn't even responded after my final text. Yet somehow I was already being blamed. As the messages continued arriving, old memories started resurfacing. This wasn't the first time I had been expected to sacrifice for my sister. Growing up, I was always the dependable one. The responsible one. Whenever something went wrong, I stepped in. Whenever help was needed, I provided it. And whenever recognition was handed out, it somehow went somewhere else. The wedding had followed the same pattern. For months, I handled countless details behind the scenes. When unexpected costs appeared, I quietly covered them. When problems surfaced, I solved them. Not because anyone forced me. Because I loved my sister. But after being told I wasn't real family, something changed. I opened my laptop. Reviewed several wedding documents. Then sent a short email withdrawing myself from every responsibility connected to the event. No anger. No revenge. Just a simple notification. Later that evening, while guests prepared to arrive from out of town, someone at the venue discovered something that would change everything. The phone rang the next morning at exactly 8:03 a.m. I almost ignored it. After everything that had happened, I wasn't interested in more family drama. But the caller wasn't a relative. It was the wedding venue. At first, I assumed they were calling by mistake. Then the event manager introduced herself and asked a question that immediately caught my attention. "Are you aware that several financial authorizations connected to tomorrow's wedding were made under your name?" I sat upright. "What do you mean?" Over the next few minutes, she explained everything. Months earlier, when my sister was struggling with deposits and vendor requirements, I had agreed to help. To simplify paperwork, several arrangements listed me as the primary financial guarantor. I hadn't thought much about it at the time. I trusted my family. Now that trust suddenly seemed very expensive. The venue had received requests to remove me from all wedding-related decisions. But according to their records, nobody could explain how those changes had been approved. That created a problem. A very large problem. Because company policy required verification from everyone attached to the agreements. Without that verification, multiple services could not move forward. The manager wasn't accusing anyone. She was simply following procedure. I answered her questions honestly. Then I thanked her and ended the call. Less than 30 minutes later, my phone exploded. My sister called. Then my mother. Then my father. Then cousins. Then relatives I hadn't heard from in years. For the first time since being kicked out, everyone suddenly wanted to speak with me. I didn't answer. I simply watched the messages arrive. And as they continued piling up, one thing became clear. Something had gone very wrong at the venue. Then another voicemail arrived. This one was from the event manager. Her voice sounded serious. The wedding has officially been placed on hold pending review. And suddenly, panic spread through my family faster than any wedding invitation ever had. By noon, my phone had become unusable. Calls, texts, voicemails. The same people who had ignored me yesterday suddenly couldn't stop reaching out. My sister alone called 17 times. Eventually I answered. The moment I picked up, she exploded. "How could you do this to me?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because the accusation was so unbelievable. "Do what?" I asked calmly. "You know exactly what," she shouted. "The venue says everything is falling apart." I took a deep breath. Then I told her the truth. I didn't cancel anything. For several seconds she said nothing. Because it was true. The venue hadn't accused me of wrongdoing. They had simply followed their own policies. The problems began when people attempted to remove me from agreements without properly updating the documentation. That wasn't my decision. That wasn't my action. That wasn't my responsibility. One by one, the facts started reaching other family members. Soon, relatives who had spent the morning blaming me began asking different questions. Questions my sister and parents struggled to answer. The biggest shock came when several vendors confirmed how much of the planning I had quietly handled. The deposits. The scheduling. The coordination. The problem-solving. Most people had assumed my parents or sister managed everything. They hadn't. I had. For months. Behind the scenes. Without asking for credit. That realization changed the entire conversation. Suddenly, people weren't asking why I wasn't helping. They were asking why I had been excluded after doing so much. By late afternoon, even my parents seemed shaken. For the first time, they weren't defending my sister. They were trying to understand the consequences. Then my sister learned something that stopped her cold. Without my support, many of the wedding arrangements she thought were guaranteed had never truly been guaranteed at all. And for the first time, she realized just how much she had taken for granted. That evening, my parents asked to meet in person. For the first time since all of this began, they weren't calling to defend my sister. They weren't asking me to stay quiet. They simply wanted to talk. When I arrived, my sister was already there. She looked exhausted. Nothing like the confident person who had sent that message the night before. For a while, nobody spoke. Then my mother broke the silence. "We were wrong." 4 simple words. Words I honestly never expected to hear. My father nodded. He admitted they had spent years expecting me to be the dependable one. The one who fixed problems. The one who sacrificed. The one who understood. And because I always stepped up, they stopped appreciating how much I carried. My sister looked down at the table. Then she quietly apologized. Not for the venue. Not for the wedding chaos. For the message. For making me feel unwanted. For treating me like I didn't belong. Hearing those words didn't magically erase the hurt. Some wounds take longer to heal. But it mattered. Because for once, someone was taking responsibility. The wedding eventually moved forward on a smaller scale. Much simpler than originally planned. And honestly, that seemed fitting. The experience taught all of us something important. Family isn't about who contributes the most. It's not about who solves every problem. And it's definitely not about who can be used the longest. Family is built on respect. The kind that should never disappear when it's inconvenient. As for me, I stopped chasing approval that day. I stopped measuring my worth by what I could do for others. Because losing that wedding invitation ended up giving me something far more valuable. The confidence to finally choose myself. And that changed my life long after the wedding was over. Sometimes the people who value you the least are the ones who depend on you the most. Respect should never be conditional, and family should never make you earn your place. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more emotional family stories with powerful twists. And tell me in the comments, would you have stayed silent or walked away too?